Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Snark Bait. I'm Sophie.
I'm Christy, and today we're going to be talking about all things Giggly Squad. We're going to be discussing Paige and Hannah's backgrounds, their careers, Hannah's on Summer House, and all of her controversies.
Season 5 in
Season
particular.
5, there's some trigger warning about suicidal ideation, so please listen with caution. Paige on Summer House and some of the mean girl behavior that she was exhibiting towards Jules. Their Instagram lives in 2020, how Giggly Squad came to be. Of course, their problematic behavior, their podcast comments, their silence on feminist issues, and just overall criticisms of what makes people itch about the Giggly Squad. So we're excited for you guys to listen to this one.
Yes, and this is a two-parter, so this is just part 1. Part 2 will come next week, but there's a lot of good stuff in our part 1, so get excited.
Enjoy, guys. Sophie,
Christy.
well, welcome back to Snark Bait, guys. It's March 11th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's been quite the day for Sophie and myself. And I think the best thing we can do for both of our mental healths and for the sake of the show is just bring ourselves right back in front of our computer screens, staring at each other, talking about the one and only topic that is Giggly Squad. But before we dive into that, Sophie, how are you doing?
Christy, it's been a tough one. We were both like running late. And Christy, at the same time as me, was like, this has been the worst day ever. I was like, wait, same. So we just did a little grounding exercise, which I think really helped. I'm usually
Yeah.
very, like I was saying to Christy before we started recording, I'm very like anti-meditation. I'm just like, I don't know. I think it's because I'm a very frenetic, like frantic person, but it actually really helped me. And I'm feeling calmer. How was your day, Christy? Why did your day suck so much?
I think I've just been talking all day, and I'm actually visiting. By the time this episode comes out, I will be in Denver visiting Shannon from Fluently Forward. Trigger warning. And there's just a lot of things that need to be done before I go off on my trip. And yeah, I think I'm just really overwhelmed. And just this show, I know we talk about it all the time. And like, I don't want to sound like I'm ungrateful because that's truly the last thing I feel. The show is the thing that grounds me, that brings me peace. But I'm not going to lie, we have full-time jobs. If you don't already follow us at SnarkBaitPod on Instagram, we say that all the time, but it's incredibly challenging to do this show on top of a full-time job. And I think, thank God for our incredible team because we actually would
hmm
not be able to do it. Like physically would not be able to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm just glad to have a friend in you, a co-host in you, a team that always listens to us and therapizes with us. And that's all I have to say on that. But
Yeah. I mean, guys, I left Christy a voice note even like earlier today crying. Like I've cried multiple times today, like work stuff, life stress, just like everything. And I left Christy a voice note crying and she like immediately FaceTimed me and immediately gave me a pep talk. And it just made me so thankful for her. She's as amazing in real life as she is, via podcast. She is just as beautiful on the inside as she is on the outside. And I'm so appreciative of you for just everything. And again, you know, life is busy, life is crazy, but it's fun to snark. So even though we're tired, it's been a bad day, I think this is going to be a fun one. Christy, I guess let's dive in. First things
please.
first, are you an ex-giggler? Is that what you consider yourself? What is your status currently with Giggly Squad?
I would like to consider myself as retired. I didn't necessarily stop listening to them like I did with the Toast, where I was like, I'm taking a stand. Like, this is such a problematic show. It was more like, I'm just not really interested in the content anymore. I would rather watch The Traitors on Peacock because I'm a newfound,
Mhm.
lover of that show.
Yep.
I I still think that if I ever get bored from cleaning and I need something to listen to, sure, I'll turn it on. But it doesn't really bring me that much joy. I know you've never historically been a giggler. Have you ever dabbled in the show at all?
So I listened to the Paige and Craig breakup episode, and that was when she like first announced the breakup, obviously. And then I also listened to the one from just last week where they talked about the Vanity Fair Oscars party, which they didn't really touch on the controversy and the hot water they were in, but I did want to hear about their experience. So those were two episodes that I listened to. And what I think is so interesting about Giggly Squad is that I feel like people who discover them through Giggly Squad and then watch Summer House have obviously like a different perception of them. Whereas I watched Summer House first. And I know,
Mm.
Christy, you only watched Summer House for the first time in the past. Like, did you binge it like you are with Southern Charm, like last year?
Yeah, I think I was a adopter of Summer House probably like within the last 3, 4 years, maybe. But I
Mm-hmm.
definitely started, I think the COVID season was my first season. I like remember I was on a plane
Oh
to
God.
Nantucket from LAX and Summer House season 5 was on the Delta Airlines flight. So I was like, oh my God, this show is good. So I started from the very beginning
What an
thereafter.
introduction. What an introduction. Season 5. That is an iconic season for many reasons. Mostly Hannah Berner. And we will get into that. What were your thoughts on Summer House before Paige and Hannah joined? Did you like the work a circus?
Oh my God. Me and my friend would always joke about how Summer House is like really bad seasons 1 and 2, and he and I would fight because he's like, call me crazy. I miss the twins. Like, sorry,
I
he's
do
gay.
too.
I
I
miss the
thought that
twins. And I'm
Carl,
like, you're,
Carl.
hey, bro. I was kind of giving Kyle though, huh?
That was Kyle.
That was pretty good. Yeah, I think the show was fine with the Work Circus. I think with Summer House being on its ninth season or something like that, it's so clear that this is such a not a scripted, but such a highly produced show. These people are not friends. They would not share a Summer House if this were 9 years ago. I love the organicness that was season 1. It felt like these were true friends, and they were. And I think that's what made the show so compelling at such an early time of reality TV.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think were your favorite seasons of Summer House? What were the glory years for you?
Oh, I don't know. That's hard because they're such different eras. Like you said, the first two seasons, it really did feel like a group of friends that there just happened to be a camera there, you know?
Yes.
And they, worked hard during the week. They played hard on the weekends. And I liked that, dynamic. Ever since the Work a Circus left and Paige and Hannah joined, it's a different dynamic where it feels more like a show, but it definitely still has its enjoyable moments. I would say that season 5, even though it was the most infuriating season to watch, was maybe the most iconic because of how psychotic Hannah was. And so basically, if you're not a Summer House follower, to give some background, Summer House, the show, debuted in 2016. And Paige and Hannah, or it debuted in 2017 on TV, but it was filmed the summer of 2016. I think I'm getting that
What?
right.
That's crazy to think
Wait.
about.
I'm sorry. Let me fact check this. I like literally thought I was such a historian that I didn't need to fact check this. Now I'm double guessing myself.
No, that actually does make sense though. That feels very correct. It just seems like 2016 was yesterday.
Right. I can't remember. Okay. So it did first air in 2017, winter of 2017. Um, but it filmed summer of 2016.
Got
That
it.
was the first season. Again, it was a group of friends. It was spearheaded by Kyle Cook. And, the Worka sisters were it was centered around them. And it had the backdoor pilot after an episode of Vanderpump Rules where Kyle Cook famously tells Stassi that she looks like Steve Jobs wearing a
Oh
turtleneck
yeah.
bathing suit.
Oh my God. That was so fucking funny.
And there was Steven, there was Christina Gibson reporting live.
Oh
There were a lot of good moments from the first two seasons, but season 3 is when we get these new cast members, Paige DeSorbo, Hannah Berner, and also Jordan, whose last name is escaping me. He doesn't matter, but they
he
were
was
all
diabolical. Sorry to interrupt.
no, he was.
Diabol. He was actually one of the most interesting specimens of a human I've ever seen on reality TV.
Correct. He
He
was like a
was
pathological liar. It was insane.
he
It
was
was insane.
so weird. He was such a weird guy, but continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, he was very weird. If you guys have watched Summer House, you know exactly what we're referring to. So Paige, Hannah, and Jordan at the time were Betch's employees, and Paige was a contractor. So she was an executive assistant full time and was a freelance fashion writer for Betches on the side. Hannah, meanwhile, was an up and coming comedian and was a full time Betches employee. They were both in their mid 20s. Hannah was 1 year or one grade older than Paige. And
Like us. I think you're
Yeah.
exactly Paige's age and I'm Hannah's age.
Yes, yes, we are the
Love.
exact ages of Paige and Hannah. They are currently 32 and 33. And I'm about to turn 33 and you just turned 34, so
I
like same
know.
thing.
Crazy.
Um, so Paige, as for her background, she came from a conservative Italian Catholic family near Albany, New York. She said that she went when she went to college, which was the College of St. Rose, which is now bankrupt and doesn't exist anymore. She lived at home for college. She also started modeling really early on, around age 5. Her degree from College of St. Rose was broadcast journalism. And before she gained this massive platform that she has today, she was kind of doing her own little segments on her Instagram called like Front Page News. And she would talk about, celebrity gossip and stuff like that. Again, after graduating, she started freelance writing about fashion for Betches and also was an executive assistant at ABC. And again, joined Summer House season 3. Apparently, Paige knew she was friends with a producer, and that's how she got on the show. And she was brought on at the same time as Hannah and Jordan, but they weren't really friends yet. Hannah and Paige became the besties they are today while filming Summer House that season. And as for Hannah's background, she is originally from Brooklyn, born and raised. She attended University of Wisconsin, where she played tennis and made that in her entire personality, as we know.
Yeah, yeah. I remember she'd always like, "Hey, Luke, her voice is really deep." And I'm not trying to hate on her voice because I have a deep voice as well. But "Hey, Luke, want to hit balls?" Like every morning on
Yeah.
Summer
And
House.
she talks about that too. Like that, I remember is like a point of conflict on the show where she feels like Lindsay is trying to make her feel bad about being more of a tomboy because she says, I'm a tomboy. I'm not a girly girl. That's just who I am. And I remember finding that really refreshing. Like I really liked them at first. Wait, Olivia, a researcher, put the funniest little note. She said, making tennis her whole personality reminds me of Alex Cooper a little. Like they both went through quote unquote trauma by playing competitive sports. Like mama, every single athlete who plays college or competitive sports deals with some trauma through their coaches. It's kind of the name of the game.
I love Olivia's insight. She's so funny. TBT to when
I
Olivia's
know.
boyfriend commented on Spotify. We're like, "Ooh, Olivia has a secret admirer." Guys, actually my boyfriend.
Oh my God. I'm obsessed with Olivia's little sidebar. She has some really insightful ones in this episode that we will get to. Uh, Olivia, our researcher, hats off.
Hats
She's the
off.
best.
She is.
Christy, unless I'm misunderstanding how well I know you, you did not play college or competitive sports growing up, did you?
Can you imagine if I was like, actually, I was a competitive soccer player, played D1. Can you imagine?
I was a
No.
I was a rower,
No,
actually.
you weren't.
No, you didn't know that about me?
Wait, really?
No kidding.
Oh,
I was on the bowling team in high school though, which I don't know if I've ever
wait.
talked about. But yeah, I needed like a sport in high school for like my college applications. And I was like, me and my girlfriend were like, let's like do bowling, the bowling team. And we did it all of high school.
That's because we were too busy watching and refreshing Perez Hilton. Let's be real. Like, I didn't have
Yes.
time. I didn't have
I was
time.
doing yearbook and refreshing Perez Hilton.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's always like, "Are you like a sporty girl?" I'm like, okay, honestly though, I was like a competitive gymnast for most of my childhood. Like I was damn good at it. Yeah.
Christy, wait,
Which
I actually knew weren't you a cheerleader also?
yes, I was a cheerleader
Yes,
as
I
well.
knew
Yeah.
that actually. I knew that. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
but
Okay, so you know what it's like.
yeah, cheer was kind of like a joke. No, I'm not saying cheer as a sport is a joke. For me, at my high school, it was, but gymnastics is fucking intense. Like wherever you go, it teaches you discipline. So that is my one sport, but it's been literal decades since I have been involved in it. But I did want to touch on Paige going to a school and commuting to school is so interesting to me. I think that there's a type of person that decides to go to college and they decide to like where they decide to go to college, I think says a lot about a person. And I think me growing up in California, although I loved my experience going to school in San Diego, I always kind of regretted not going to like a huge school like Indiana University, right? I'm like, oh, that would have been a really nice, fun American, like typical experience to go to like a college with D1 football. I think it's so interesting that Paige, with the personality that she has, she's a trendsetter, she's cute, she's popular. You would think she would want to go to a school like that. But then it's like, oh my God, the choice to actually attend a school within commuting distance of your childhood home and also living at home is definitely a choice. I don't know. Is that surprising to you?
It is, but it's also not because what we've gathered about Paige is that she's extremely close with her parents. She's
Yes.
very, very, very tight with her family, and Hannah is too. They both come from kind of privileged, family oriented. They don't come from, a broken home or anything like that. They come from very privileged, tight-knit families. And so, yeah, from what I've gathered about Paige, is that she's extremely close with her parents and also, again, conservative upbringing. I think that her parents, like she even says, there was like a TikTok recently that came up on my For You page, and it was Paige's like entrance into Summer House. And she's like, yeah, my parents, if they knew that I was staying in a house with a bunch of boys, they would freak out because she lived at home during college. Like she was very much kind of like a daddy's girl.
Yes. And from listening to Giggly Squad, she speaks of her fit parents fondly, but fondly in a way that's like, it's not even, I'm not saying it's weird. It's just the degree to which she is close with her family is certainly non-standard to a lot of people our age. And I'm like, listen, I talk to my mom literally every day. I talk to my dad literally every day. That was certainly not the case when I lived far away from them. I've gotten closer with them as I've moved closer to them in proximity, but her closeness with her family is very not normal. And I think to your point, people say that they've had this almost charmed upbringing. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have charmed upbringing. You can't help the family that you were born into. Um, but I think it just definitely it shapes the way that they navigate the world in a really privileged
Hmm.
way. Again, not a bad thing. It's just the way that they grew up. Can't help that.
Exactly. That is such a good point that like you don't choose how you're brought up, but it definitely shapes the fact that, when I think of them, I think about the fact that they're extremely privileged and kind of have grown up in a bubble and they don't perceive things beyond their own narrow worldview. Um, and their brand of, feminism or whatever it is very white, upper middle class,
Heteronormative as well.
heteronormative. Exactly. Um, as for Hannah's background, again, she was working in video for a few different brands before she joined Betches. She was creating content for them and eventually was fired after starting Summer House. And that's when she became kind of a content creator in her own right. And same with Paige. When they joined Summer House, their platform started to grow. They eventually started their own podcast. Hannah had her podcast Burning in Hell from 2018 until 2022 where she interviewed comedians, reality stars, influencers, et cetera, et cetera. Um, After Hannah's very dramatic departure from Summer House in 2021, which we will get to, she started really focusing on comedy and podcasting. And she really started to kind of blow up.
You know
And
what's interesting about Hannah's career? I remember before I even watched Summer House, she was kind of the one to look out for. I already knew who Hannah
Mhm.
Berner was well before I started the show. And I think most people would say that she is one of the most successful people to come out of reality television from Bravo and has completely been able to successfully separate herself from her persona on reality TV. I think a
Mhm.
lot of people have a lot of difficulty making that quote unquote transition, right? And I'm trying to think of even like another Bravo reality star that has been able to make such a successful transition outside of Bravo sphere. Can you even
Yeah.
think of one?
No, it's unbelievable, especially for someone who had such an embarrassing stint
Yes.
on the show, which I guess we should jump into.
Hmm.
I know, Christy, you said your first foray into Summer House was watching season 5.
I hate to say this because we're going to disagree on this.
Oh God, you liked
I
Hannah during that season.
I didn't like her, but I think I didn't despise her as most of the public did. I always try to
Hmm.
root for the underdog, and I kind of was feeling that Hannah was a little bit misunderstood. Like I see a lot of myself in Hannah, and I can just say that with a lot of self-awareness. I think that she's just kind of very much in her own head, and she's not really cognizant. I don't know. I'm making myself seem very selfish. I think there's attributes of herself that I find a lot of relatability to, right or wrong. But I'm curious, like, what were your biggest issues with Hannah?
Oh my God, I don't even know where to begin. I thought that something that I just don't relate to is an inability to take accountability. Like I feel
Totally.
like I'm not trying to like toot my own horn, but I think it's pretty easy for me to be like I fucked up. And Hannah just cannot take accountability. I think we kind of touched on that a little bit during Dark Energy Tuesday when we were talking about her, is that it was really surprising that she even acknowledged fault regarding her Meg the Stallion interview and that fiasco, because I think it's really hard for her to take accountability. And I think that's such an insufferable personality trait. Um, but I guess just to give you guys some context, if you haven't watched Summer House, season 5 was Hannah and Paige's third season in the house. So season 3, they were the newbies. Season 4, they were more established. They bullied Jules. Season 4, Justice for Jules. And I will discuss this a little more when we talk about Paige, but I feel like a lot of this episode does focus on Hannah. um, season 4, they bully this girl, Jules. That's again, that's a whole thing. Season 5,
That deserves its own episode, TBH. Like, that
it
was
really
crazy.
does. Justice for Jules.
Yeah.
Um, so it's COVID season. It's filmed in 2020. Hannah, the previous season, had started to have somewhat of a fling with Luke Gulbranson, who was the hot new stud on season 4, and they had this flirtatious relationship. In season 5, he brings Sierra Miller onto the house, and he's like, "Hey, I brought this girl. We have history together. I'm not really interested in you anymore, Hannah." And Hannah just starts to unravel. She also famously feuds with castmate Kyle Cook. And that is also when Kyle Cook actually it's in season 4 when he dubs Paige and Hannah the Giggly Squad because they were laughing in the corner. And so, yeah, Hannah loses her marbles. Season 5, she was clashing with multiple housemates. Something that I remember is that they would divvy up their chores in the house. And Hannah's chore was taking out the trash. She volunteered for it and she just like wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And then when Kyle or like anyone would try to be like, "Hey, Hannah, can you take out the trash? You haven't taken out the trash." She would throw a fit. She would throw a temper tantrum.
Can I
And
ask you a question, Sophie?
yeah, of course.
So when I was watching this season, I remember thinking, oh my God, I am such a Kyle. I feel like I definitely will pull my weight. But then I remember watching Sierra and Hannah and just being like, these girls would drive me absolutely nuts. And I get it. I understand that I'm a type A personality and I like things done a certain way. I would probably drive other people that are type B nuts. I get that. Are you more of a Hannah when it comes, or would you say you're more of a Kyle when you're
Okay,
like,
so I know we talk about me being type B personality and definitely disorganized in some ways. If I'm at a share house or anywhere, I pull my fucking weight. I don't want to live in a frat house. Like,
bingo?
ew, I'm also a germaphobe. So it's like that part of my personality comes out. Like, yeah, absolutely not. I definitely relate more to Kyle,
Hmm.
and I would be really grossed out living with people like Hannah and like Sierra that season. I think Sierra's gotten better about cleaning her room, but she famously
Oh,
had like a
yeah.
pigsty bedroom.
Yeah.
And, some of the fights they would get in, Hannah would just say outrageous things. For instance, Amanda, you can let him yell at you, but I won't tolerate him yelling at me. Like talking about Kyle, Amanda's at that point her fiance. Uh she says, "You're acting like my dad" to Kyle. And Kyle says, "I don't know why you would say that I'm acting like your dad." She goes, "Don't talk about my dad ever again. Don't talk about my
That's
family."
crazy.
A crazy moment. She also has sex with Des, her now husband, in Kyle and Amanda's bathroom. Eventually, Kyle and Amanda disinvite her from their wedding. And at this point, at the reunion, everyone hates Hannah. No one wants to film with her ever again. They even say as much, kind of, this is a show about friends. It also is important to note that it wasn't just what was happening in the house. And again, I feel like a lot of people like to use the excuse for Hannah this season, saying it was COVID. She went a little crazy. Can you blame her? We all went crazy. Because she went to the reunion and did not take accountability for one single thing. It'd be one thing if she showed up at the reunion saying, "Hey, I fucked up." Do you remember Hannah joking about Luke's trigger warning suicidal ideation on a podcast?
Yes, and I think it's really, frankly, hypocritical because her and Paige are so open and honest on Giggly Squad about their struggles with anxiety and depression, and they say it in like a flippant, kind of joking way. But I think with all jokes, there is a little bit of truth, and I think, if you yourself are someone who has dealt with a level of depression, maybe not suicidal ideation, but someone who's been super sad where they can't get out of bed, then you would know not to joke about something as severe as this. And I think you and I, like it or hate it, we're like Luke Albertson apologists. Like I really don't see any issue with him. He's just like a hodunk, like Midwestern kind of guy. And I think he's
Himbo.
yes, and he's just hot. Like, oh my God, he's so hot. He has like that pretty privileged halo effect. But I just thought it was really nasty and mean, and that cannot be rationalized in my mind whatsoever. How about you?
Yeah. So, for context, guys, Hannah went on a podcast in early 2021, and this was before the reunion was filmed, but after that 2020 season of Summer House. And she was retelling a story about how Luke, was talking about how he was having suicidal ideation. And she jokes about it and says, I just want to have sex with you. Like, why are you telling me this? That clip has been completely scrubbed from the internet. She
Really?
eventually put out like a jokey, it was like an apology, but with a meme. Um, and also we'll get into the fact that she's very much known for stealing jokes and back in the day, stealing memes and like tweets and internet jokes. But she got a lot of backlash for this. BetterHelp dropped their sponsorship with her. Um, and again, she released an apology on Instagram. She also on a podcast, and this was Danny Pellegrino's podcast, actually, I believe. She outed Carl for abusing drugs and said he had a bloody nose one morning, which Carl has come clean about his addiction issues and the fact that he's sober now. But that's, I think, an overstep to kind of out someone for that, especially if you're saying that he had a bloody nose. Like he was abusing, she says Adderall, but I think it was code for
Coke.
Coke.
Yeah.
And then when she's confronted about it at the reunion, she says, I never said that. It was like the lying and the gaslighting. It was really, really crazy.
Was
Uh,
she making those allegations on Danny's podcast during like when she was still on the show?
Yeah, she hadn't been like fired yet because it was before the
Oh,
reunion was filmed. So it was kind of an amalgamation of all of these things that eventually led to her demise on
yeah.
Bravo. And that's why, in July 2024, as we know, because it's now being talked about on this season of Summer House, when she says that Bravo didn't fire me, Kyle got me fired because he was mad that I promoted Truly or whatever she's saying is such revisionist history and such gaslighting. It's infuriating. And that's why when we talked about this on Dark Energy Tuesday, I'm like, hello, I see where Kyle's coming from because I watched that season live and she was insufferable, infuriating. Everyone hated her. She got so much backlash that season. And I completely believe when Kyle says that her Q rating was the lowest Q rating any Bravo stars like ever had, I believe it.
Do you think that there is some level of like maybe 95% was the Q rating and there was like a 5% nudge from Kyle because of the Truly debacle? Because I don't disagree with you. I think that she would have been fired regardless if she had done the Truly campaign or not. But I do think that Kyle does have a level of influence over production in a way that other cast members do not on Summer House. And I feel like although he was not the actual reason, he probably was a bit of a nut. And I'm not saying she shouldn't have been fired. I'm just saying like Kyle has so much influence on that production team and on the show.
He does, but at the same time, Kyle's had so many embarrassing things air and so many things that make him look bad
Yeah.
that if I think that if he had enough power to produce, he would have made himself look better over the years. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. And I think regardless, she was almost like Dorinda on her last season when she was talking about the turkey baster in Tinsley. It was that level of just horrificness. And Dorinda was fired for being just a drunk asshole. Hannah was fired for just being a person people just really disliked. Like I think with
Yep.
Dorinda it was like Dorinda at the end of the day, like I have a soft spot for her. Like say what you want, but I really have a soft spot for Dorinda. At that time upon Hannah's firing, I was like, I guess you kind of deserved it though.
Absolutely. So, wrapping up Summer House, the Summer House of it all. Paige, for her part, even though she did not get fired that season and is still on the show, she's not without her fair share of Summer House controversies over the years. Again, circling back to the season 4 treatment of Jules, Jules was kind of the new girl. She was a woman of color, actually from my hometown of Cincinnati, and
Love.
she's a chili heiress. Her family owns Gold Star Chili. The competitor Skyline is like better in my opinion, but like Gold Star is good if you're in a pinch. But they basically Paige, Amanda, and Hannah kind of bullied her. And there's one scene of Amanda kicking a bottle of alcohol while Jules is drinking it and like with her boot. And then there is another scene where they're playing a game, and it's one of those really mean, like Heather Gay type games where
Yeah.
it's like, if the house is on fire and you could save everyone but one person, who would you not save? And Amanda said Jules, and basically was like, I don't trust you because I guess Jules that season was hooking up with Jordan, which is
With
also a
Jordan.
whole other thing and is disgusting. But she was like, if you hook up with a liar, then I think you're a liar. And Jules had a really good comeback that was like, you're like dating Kyle.
Amanda
Sh-
loves to do that. She
Yeah.
loves to do that.
So this is when Paige, Amanda, and Hannah and that clique first get labeled as mean girls. And even though Hannah's no longer there and she's kind of been replaced in the clique by Sierra,
Yes.
you still see it. I have noticed it this season, and I know I'm a Lexi apologist with their treatment of Lexi. I don't know if you picked up on this last episode, Christy, from last week when Amanda goes, Lexi was like, Paige and Sierra are right there. Like she's trying to hang with the girls, Lexi is, and trying to
Mhm.
comfort Paige when she storms off because she's angry at Kyle. And Amanda goes, okay, thanks, Lexi, and like shoos her away.
Oh, I didn't
And then
cop that. That's a good one.
and then Paige also goes, Lexi, can you do me a favor
Oh,
and
yeah.
find out if Kyle is with Amanda right now? Like, shoo, do me a favor, like bossing her around. It's like they get labeled as mean girls, and Paige has taken issue with being labeled a mean girl before, but we've seen what I consider a lot of mean girl behavior. And that's just me though. I know it's kind of subjective. Something that I don't think is subjective. I don't know if you remember this, Christy, when she weaponized Lindsay's miscarriage against her on the season 6 reunion.
Oh, yeah. I remember this like it was yesterday. Cigarette in my mouth.
So this was bad.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, Lindsay had just recently had a miscarriage after a brief relationship with Jason on Winter House. Oh God, I miss Winter House. I wish they'd bring it back. Um, because Lindsay, was kind of in her single era at this time, Paige accused her of quote unquote running a brothel because she hooked up with multiple men that summer. And, so again, that's slut shaming for
Yeah.
someone who purports to be a feminist icon. Lindsay counters with the fact that, lots of housemates are bringing people home and hooking up. And Paige says, well, they didn't just have a miscarriage. It's like, I think the person who had a miscarriage is allowed to bring it up, but I don't think that's okay to bring up someone else's.
Period. I think that's a very objective thing, and I don't think that's controversial to say that it's messed up that she is bringing up the miscarriage to weaponize it against Lindsay, who's grieving or not grieving in a way that feels comfortable for her.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Perfectly said. I also don't know if you remember this on Southern Charm. I know that you have watched Southern Charm until what, season 5?
I am now on it's the season where Thomas Ravenel is now in jail.
Oh
And
God.
yeah, it's so
Classic.
fucking good. It's classic.
Classic.
It's
So
classic.
this is also following Winter House. On Winter House, Sierra and Austin have a fling.
Oh, of course, I remember this. Yes.
Yes. While Paige and Craig are first starting their relationship. On an episode of Southern Charm, Paige is visiting Craig in Charleston. Austin is there also, obviously. And Austin also was a fuckboy from the start. In this situation, he was very clearly playing both Lindsay and Sierra. Actually, at the one summer house party that I attended back in the day,
You went
it
to a
was
summer house party?
forever ago, but yes,
Wait,
it
what
was.
season?
Oh my God, what season was it? It
And can I see you
was,
in the footage? Like, can I go back to the episode and see you?
I think there might be one shot where I'm in the background. I
Wait, that's
think.
so
And
fun.
I actually told this story in Trigger Warning Ryan Bailey's show recently, how I actually talked to Austin that day. And then, like, on camera, when I'm watching the episode, I see him, like, right after talking to me, being like, there are no hot girls here.
He don't get me started on Austin, like, because I will not stop. He gives me the darkest energy out of the whole trio
I
of them.
know, but I'm such an Austin apologist now because I really like him this season. Anyway,
Is he
that
hot in
was
real life? Sorry to
he's
interrupt.
tall. He's really tall. Like I get it. Like you'll get it when you see him because he's so freaking tall, unfortunately. But actually that day that I was there was the episode where he kisses Sierra and Lindsay on the same day at the same party. And
Iconic.
and I remember like seeing it happen. I was like, wait. I was like, wait, I have no one to talk to about this yet because like
Yeah.
you sign like an NDA when you walk in and like also it hasn't aired yet. There's no like discourse about it. But anyway, Sierra, I guess, was in Charleston the same time. Paige is like, our girl's in town. Sierra, like, you should hit her up, knowing full well that Austin is a fuck boy and is gonna break her heart into a million pieces, as we've watched Sierra over and over again get her heart broken by these mediocre white men.
Yes.
And so I just felt like she was putting her friend in the line of fire. Also, putting Sierra in the line of fire. Do you remember the fight she got in that turned physical with Danielle on Summer House?
It's
Yeah.
giving when Rinna, you don't talk about the husband, but not as intense. But yes, of course I
There was
remember it.
there was glass thrown
Yeah.
and Paige did a really good job of firing her up to the point that she got in this physical altercation while, she kind of just sat back with like her little smirk.
I
S-
remember the moment before they were set to go downstairs in the kitchen for dinner. Paige said something to the effect of like, I can't wait to see, like, you better bring it tonight. Like, I distinctly remember Paige like verbally telling Sierra she better bring it tonight at dinner.
Yes. And I think that she was setting her friend up to be labeled as an angry Black woman, which
Hmm.
she unfortunately was by the Bravo audience when this happened. And believe it or not, around this time was when Danielle was kind of a fan favorite. Like people really liked Danielle, um,
LOL. Oh my God.
which is crazy to think about. But
Crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
for like, I remember season 5 when everyone hated Hannah, everyone loved Danielle. And season 6 and onwards. And then she obviously got really cringy. And then Winter House happened. But people were really mad at Sierra and very much Team Danielle during that altercation. And Paige, for the most part, is known for that stuff. She's known for kind of like pulling the strings a little bit, but not actually like getting into those altercations as much herself. And again, like I think that's why it's interesting how in the last most recent episode where she turns to Kyle and says, "Did you just say I'm being two-faced?" I'm like, well, you kind of are, because that's kind of what she's known for is having snarky confessionals while being nice to people's faces. And same with, at the reunion. She'll always come with like all of these like little one-liners at the reunion and so many issues that she has with Lindsay. But then during the season, there's I'm like, what was your problem? You were fine during the season. All you did was kind of just like be nice to everyone and like lay in bed.
Paige has it so good in Summer House because she is, like I said in Dark Energy Tuesday, she's the most beloved person, one of the most beloved people to come out of Bravo ever. Maybe even of all time. I'm trying to think of someone who would compete with her status of just queen of Bravo without really being messy at all. Every
Hmm.
fight she has had on camera is on behalf of someone else.
Yep,
And
exactly.
she has a cushy job, dude. Like I envy it. I'm like, dude, if I could switch places with anyone, reality TV, it would be Paige.
Yeah, because all she has to do is lay in bed and collect a paycheck.
Yes.
And that's why she is known as like the queen of the bed bugs. And it's especially evident this season because I think again, like I'm around the same age and I don't want to go out. Like I want to lay in
No.
bed, but I'm not getting paid to be on a show where you're supposed to party? So it kind of makes for boring television. I feel like she's outgrown the show. I think the show in general has kind of outgrown its current format and cast. Like
Hmm.
something needs to change. You can tell she doesn't really want to be here this season.
I feel like she's almost above the show at this point because her celebrity has risen so much to
Like,
where
just go
Paige is,
do yeah, I feel like
yeah,
Giggly Squad makes her more money anyway. Like, just go focus on Giggly Squad.
100%. You have 24 hours in a day, focus it on making the show even better. That's
Yeah.
what I would do. And that's what I would advise her.
So, like I said, Giggly Squad beginnings. It was okay. This one ring light keeps going out, so I have one ring light now. That's fine.
It's okay.
So Kyle Cook dubs Hannah and Paige as the Giggly Squad during a fight during season 4. In 2020, during COVID, Paige and Hannah start hosting nightly Instagram lives titled Giggly Squad, which ultimately gained a following. It was just Instagram lives. Did you ever tune into these, Christy?
No, I actually was shocked when I was reading the outline. I was like, oh, I had no idea that was the inception of the
Yeah.
podcast. Did you ever
Yeah.
watch them on Instagram?
No, I didn't watch them, but I knew that they started with Instagram lives.
That's what everyone was doing in 2020, remember?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it was COVID and everyone was like,
Yeah.
what do we do? We're stuck inside.
Yeah.
So, anyway, they officially turned it into a podcast in October 2020, and it quickly took off. It's now massively successful. They sold out Radio City
Radio
Music
City.
Hall twice this year. They have a huge fan base, successful merch. They're coming out with a book in April. The podcast consistently ranks as like one of the top TV and film podcasts in America, top 10 in all comedy podcasts. Um, in terms of content, they kind of just like riff off of each other. And when we talked on Dark Energy Tuesday about their Vanity Fair interviews, I said that, I feel like they found so much success from just riffing off each other and not coming prepared at all because they don't. Like, they don't show up to the recordings with like notes. They're just like, let's just joke around for like an hour, you know?
You know what's really interesting about the show as well is I actually have a lot of IRL, like my sister, for instance, who doesn't watch Summer House. One of my old coworkers don't watch Summer House. They have such a high conversion rate, and I think they attract a lot of their audience members, not even from Summer House. I know it from my own life. It's through
Hmm.
TikTok and Instagram Reels.
Yeah.
They do such a good job of just like getting new people in the door, regardless of your history with the two of them. It's like it's actually incredible what they've been able to do. Because think of how many Bravo people have a podcast. I can
Yeah.
literally, it's everyone. It's more of who doesn't have a podcast from Bravo. And I think they've been able to successfully come out on top, not just on top when it comes to just relative to Bravo people that have podcasts. No, no, no. They're on top in general in the podcast sphere. It's
Oh,
amazing.
100%. They have one of the top podcasts like in the world.
Yeah.
And they talk about, pop culture, personal stories. They just kind of like joke around. They'll talk about fashion trends, etc. A lot of self-deprecation. Um, their listeners are known as the gigglers. And I think something that I've noticed in terms of like feedback about the podcast from gigglers is that they don't seem to want to talk about celebrity gossip as much because they're becoming like too famous. Like they are rubbing shoulders with some of these celebrities. They were just at the Vanity Fair red carpet. And so that's just some
Oh.
feedback that I've seen.
Could never be like my ass is continuing to chat no matter what. Like, even if we were to ever get on that level, God willing, like
Yeah.
I could never shut my mouth when it comes to celebrities. It's too interesting to me.
Same, same. I'd be like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
I have like multiple influencers that we've talked about. And I'm not saying this to like toot my own horn, but like they like
No.
follow me on Instagram or like whatever, followed me on Twitter, whatever it is. Like Serena fucking Kerrigan followed me on Twitter last time I checked. I'm like,
Pa
I don't care. I'm still going to talk about them.
Paige Lorenz follows you on Instagram.
I do.
Everyone is like, do Paige Lorenz, do Paige, like knocking down our doors. And Sophie's like, I
I'm
can't touch
scared.
it. I'm
No, I'm
scared.
I'm just scared of Paige Lawrence in general because I know
Me
that
too.
she's a little litigious when it comes to gossip about her. So
And
at
she's,
some point,
yeah.
I think we should, but I think that that's one that we have to be careful with.
Paywall,
Um,
Patreon, we'll do it behind a paywall at one point.
yes,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of different like giggly squad controversial statements that have occurred. I guess let's jump into those. I do want to talk about like Paige and Hannah's side projects because Paige, for her part, still does, fashion influencing. She started off, doing looks for less on
Mhm.
Instagram. She would post, say a Hailey Bieber look or an Olivia Culpo look and be like, here's my like fast fashion version of it. Now she does Amazon lives. Um, a lot of people criticize her style as being just trendy and not really interesting or actually stylish. And I agree with that. But clearly she's found that audience of just like basic, like Stassi type followers.
Mhm. No, we said it before. Amanda actually has the most unique
Yes.
sense of style and has the biggest sense of style, but she just isn't as cute and flirty with her fashion as Paige is.
Yes, exactly. And Hannah, for her part, like they both kind of have their little niches. Paige has her fashion, Hannah has her comedy career. And Hannah, for her part, has also had a decent amount of controversy surrounding her comedy career, but we can get to that later. I think for now, let's talk about some of the problematic things that Giggly Squad has said on their podcast. Do you remember Paige DeSorbo's quote unquote light skin comment in 2021?
No, I didn't. I think at this point I wasn't following them at all.
Hmm.
But this, my jaw was to the floor. Walk me through it.
So this was right after Bridgerton came out. It was January 2021, and Paige expressed that she thought Regé-Jean Page, who was like the Duke or Duke of Hastings, what was his name in Bridgerton? I don't know.
I low key hated that show. Don't
I
come for
hated
me,
that show
please.
too.
Oh
I
my,
hated it too. I hated it too.
Sophie, me and my mom joke about this all the time. We're like, it is a lowbrow show. And please don't come for me. Everyone has different strokes, different folks. I'm not judging you. I thought it was a horrific show.
I hated it. I'm sorry. It's just not, it's not my type. I'm not like a Shondaland girl. Nothing wrong with it. It's just like, I'm not, Shondaland isn't for me necessarily.
Yeah.
But she expressed that she thought that Regé-Jean Page, oh yeah, it does say Duke of Hastings, yes, would be an excellent choice for the next James Bond because he's British and he's light skinned.
Oh my,
So
after BLM too, like, come on.
yeah,
Not that it's ever
uh,
appropriate to make a comment like that, but like the awareness, the social awareness was high.
exactly. And people found this obviously really offensive and inappropriate. She only apologized after her fans begged her to. She was even, and this is something that she, again, I feel like even recently has been accused of deleting comments, blocking people, liking ones, defending her. She eventually did release an apology on the podcast. And she said she wanted to take the time to sincerely apologize to anyone that she offended. It was not her intention. She recognized what she said was wrong. She's committed to learning and growing, etc. A good apology. And Hannah also apologized for being complicit in Paige's remarks. She said, because we are the Giggly Squad and we are a team, I also want to apologize for not saying anything in the moment. But as the Giggly Squad, we own our shit and we are committed to continue to learn, also to unlearn and to continue to grow. And I thought this was ironic because of what just happened with
Mm,
Hannah Berner and Meg the Stallion and Paige having nothing to do with that apology.
wow, great analogy. That's actually Hannah did the right thing because Hannah didn't fucking say that shit. She still owned it because they are a team. You and I
Yeah,
are a team. What's your downfalls are mine, and like the same, goes for you as well. That's big of Hannah
exactly.
to own it. That's crazy that Paige didn't also make a comment because she should have.
I agree. I agree. Um, and yeah, people thought this comment was, it started a larger conversation around colorism, and a lot of Black Bravo accounts were, explaining why this is problematic. Even if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't really get why that's a bad thing. An account called Mainly Bravo said, I don't think people understand what the actual issue is, and that's concerning. The issue isn't her saying he's light skinned because he is light skinned. That's a fact. The issue is her saying he would be perfect for the role because of his light skin. Like darker skin would disqualify someone from being an acceptable James Bond in her eyes. That is why people are offended.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. That's
Yeah.
straightforward, and that's a very straightforward way of understanding why it's problematic. We all know he's light
Yes.
skinned. That's not a surprise.
But it's saying that he would be better for the role because he's light skinned and that his skin
Correct.
isn't too dark. Like that's, yeah. And previously on what I believe was an Instagram live and not the podcast, um, Hannah joked about Paige having autism because she is like good at fashion. She
Can
said
we
that
just
she's like autistic with like how she knows how to put an outfit together, like using autistic as like a synonym for um good at something, I guess.
You know what's really pisses me off, and I should have added this to Dark Energy Tuesday, is because we are such an online society and people don't want to go to therapy, they'd rather hear like therapy women at therapy women on TikTok for their therapy services. Everyone is like self-diagnosing and it is so incredibly harmful and it pisses me off and it's not a joking matter. Everyone's like, I have this, I have that, I have this, I have. No, you're anal retentive about your fashion. Like, doesn't mean you're fucking autistic. It's such a crazy thing to say, but it's becoming so common and it's not
Yeah.
funny to me.
It's ableist. I'm
It
sorry,
is.
it is.
Thank you. Yes, that's the right word.
It's ableist. They also dead named Caitlyn Jenner at one point. Paige made some biphobic comments about bisexual men, and then also Ariana Madix. She said that she would never date a bisexual man because he'd just want to have sex with other men and not her. She also said at the time that Ariana Madix was an example of a bisexual person who was miserable.
Don't come for
There,
my girl like that. Like, I
I
swear to God,
know.
I love Ariana.
And she was miserable, but it wasn't because she was bi. It
Yeah,
was because she was dating Tom Sandoval.
correct.
And I don't know if you remember hearing about this ever, but their first Giggly Squad Facebook group was an insane, like, MAGA breeding ground. And anything pro BLM or anything that criticized Trump was removed.
Hmm.
And then racist, hate speech, N word with the hard R, anti Semitism, transphobia,
Yikes.
etc. There was a lot of QAnon shit. There was also someone who said at one point that they were in an argument with another person in the Facebook group and said that they hoped that person was raped. And
What?
I understand there's only so much you can do in terms of like moderating a Facebook group,
Yeah.
but I think it's interesting that at least at first that was kind of their fan base. And they would joke around and say, "Well, guys, we can't be managed." And that's kind of a line they say a lot is we can't be managed. And I think just in general, generally speaking, they seem extremely afraid of losing conservative fans
Hmm.
or taking a stance on anything. So they never really stand for anything.
Hmm.
Um, Even when January 6th happened, Paige got criticized for she was posting memes that day. And I'm not saying that you have to like I don't fucking remember what I posted on January 6th, but I guess she got some backlash for posting silly memes instead of acknowledging, January 6th just happened. Um and she kind of like threw a temper tantrum when people were criticizing her. And then her IRL best friend also in this Facebook group, compared BLM protesters to animals, and Paige defended her.
You know what's
So,
funny? Did you see that TikTok of someone saying, "Oh, Craig has this like alt-right QAnon Instagram account,"
yes.
and of course, because Snarkbait Pod is blocked by Craig, and he also blocked Xnazal and Soph_Ross, I could tell based on going to that account that it was in fact not Craig because I could see the profile. And for those of you guys who don't know, if you're blocked by an account, any account associated to that person's account, even if it's a separate, completely different Instagram account, you still cannot view it. So I know for a fact it was not Craig's account, but there's been a lot of speculation that it perhaps is Craig's father's account. And I think just her being with Craig, I don't, especially even now that I'm watching Southern Charm, it's really clear that Craig is Republican, which, okay, sure. But it's like, it doesn't surprise me at all anymore that Paige is as well, because she dated Craig for as long as she did. So, I mean, none of this, what I'm all that to say is none of this surprises me at all.
Yes. Yeah, people have been speculating just recently, really. I don't think people knew that Paige and Hannah didn't really take a stance on anything politics wise, but people are saying recently as it's come out that Craig is kind of maybe this conspiracy theorist, right-wing conservative guy that, Paige dating him for more than 3 years kind of indicates, especially the fact also that she comes from a conservative Catholic family. People
Yeah.
speculate that maybe her politics lean right. So, just in general, people have criticized the fact that the podcast, again, they don't really seem to take a stance on anything. And while they claim to be this kind of like feminist girl power podcast, they never once, talked about the election or advocated for Kamala Harris or, anything that you might expect a quote unquote feminist podcast to do. uh, have not taken a stance on something like, for example, Roe v. Wade. And again, I'm not saying that every podcast has to do that. That's not what people listen to our podcast for. But a lot of people have said that, they are kind of like these textbook white feminists. They're very heteronormative. Uh, again, they champion women's empowerment on their show, but they rarely discuss issues non-white women go through, and that they don't really seem educated really on women's issues truly, and that their feminism is kind of like feminism 101. It focuses on kind of like how I perceive it as feminism that's like, if a man did it, no one would be mad. But because it's a woman, blah, 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 which to an extent is true about a lot of things. But like that's not like groundbreaking feminism, you know?
And I think this criticism that we're saying about the Giggly Squad is we're not expecting every single podcast that we listen to take a stance on really anything. But I think when your entire brand is quite literally foundationalized on being such a feminist and, taking down dismantling the patriarchy,
Mhm.
then you better believe we're going to look at you for these views when things such as Roe v. Wade come up. It's a reasonable expectation.
Mhm.
Do I go to Crime Junkie, who I listen to for true crime, to hear about what they think about women's rights or political activism? No, and they don't talk about it, and I don't expect them to. And I will not get mad at them if Ashley Flowers and Britt never speak on these things. But Jiggly Squad, they are at a different expectation because of the topics that they discuss. So I think it's very reasonable for us and their listeners to be upset when these things are not brought up.
Exactly. By the way, I thought for a second, I don't think you did, but I thought for a second that you just said Jiggly Squad. And then I just thought Julie Squad. Remember that movie Julie with Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez? Wasn't that what it was called? Julie?
Yes, remember with her ass in that movie frame? Okay, let me say one of my favorite movies is not Gigli, it's Bennifer's other feature film
Jersey
called
Girl?
Jersey Girl is quite
Jersey Girl.
literally my favorite film I've ever seen.
It's been a minute, but that was a good movie. I
Oscar
agree
worthy.
that that was a good movie. That was a good movie.
It was so good. Sorry, how did we get here?
I don't oh, because I thought you said Jiggly Squad and I was like, Julie. Um,
Jiggly
anyway,
Squad.
so so yeah, like their brand of feminism very much focuses on kind of like being white and achieving power and status for themselves as privileged white women. It's kind of like girl boss feminism who care more about like leveling up than dismantling, systemic inequalities that affect mostly marginalized groups. It's kind of like I make enough money, so I don't need a man.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
like, that's not really, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So it's kind of been labeled as like peak white feminism.
Yeah.
Um, they've also gotten criticism for like being it's gotten a little repetitive because if you've been doing a podcast for as long as they have been doing it, like 5 years almost, and all you do is kind of like riff off each other and talk about your weekends, like you eventually like probably run out of interesting things to talk about. So people have said that they get really repetitive and repeat stories a lot. They also gush. Like I said at the top of the episode, they both are very close with their parents and come from privileged backgrounds. They gush about their parents a lot, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's some criticism that they've gotten is that it feels alienating for some listeners. Um, and also the fact that their parents kind of paid for their careers before their careers took off. Like Paige says when she first enters Summer House that her parents paid her rent. So again, it's kind of like this very privileged background and relationship with their parents that they gush about a lot. And there's
Mhm.
nothing inherently wrong with inherently. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but that's just some criticism that they've gotten.
Well, I think it informs also why they have such a privileged stance, and it's kind of there's a lot of people that come from privileged backgrounds that don't also have those beliefs that they can kind of learn a little bit. They can learn more to maybe modify the beliefs that they were brought up with. And I think again, just knowing that so many women look up to them, it's like we kind of have an expectation that you guys are going to learn a little bit more than what the barriers of your beliefs were from your family
Right.
unit.
Exactly. Um Some also say that they have pretty thin skin when it comes to criticism.
Us.
I don't know what that's like. Like we're nothing like that.
No, like
Yeah, like what do you mean? Like that's
what?
so
Like that's
embarrassing.
yeah, that's weird.
So weird. Um and that they also foster an echo chamber that squashes any negative feedback. The gigglers are often likened to Swifties in regard to attacking anyone who's not like praising Hannah and Paige. Someone on Reddit said a comment on the Giggly Snark subreddit. The way the gigglers ride so hard for Paige and Hannah is kind of sad. You're not actually in a cult. Hannah and Paige will never know your name or give two shits about your well being. And lastly, another criticism of the podcast as a whole is that they fail to produce anything meaningful. I mean, that's not like what you're going to Giggly Squad for, but it's been likened to brain rot very
Mm,
often.
yeah, yeah, and there at some point, I do understand that it's really hard to take criticism, but I think at their level of fame, it's like buckle up, girls. Like you will, it's gonna get worse. This whole Meg
Exactly.
the Stallion, I think, kind of they probably came to a realization that their influence and their power is far greater than they ever expected. And I think this whole Meg the Stallion thing is just the beginning. Um, yeah,
Yes, and they're being introduced to a new audience that did not know who they were with the Meg Thee Stallion thing. And I think that this is like a good place to leave it. I know that again, we didn't touch on the Meg Thee Stallion fiasco in the Vanity Fair red carpet or Paige and Craig's breakup or more of the criticism regarding Giggly Squad and Hannah's comedy career and a lot of other things. So this is going to be a two-parter. There's a lot.
absolutely.
Yes. But yeah, thank you guys for listening to part one. Watch out for part two next week. And yeah, thank you again for listening. I just like completely forgot how to do an outro. Thank you
Yeah,
guys for listening. Leave us
follow
a
us.
follow us at SnarkBaitPod, at X Knows All, at Soph_Ross. Leave us a 5-star review. Thank you to Olivia, our researcher, Jenna, our producer, or Jordan, our producer, Jenna, our social manager. Thank you, baby Snarks. Thank you to my gorgeous co-host, Christy, who again gave me a pep talk today when I was having a mental breakdown.
Love
Um,
you.
love you. Love you, baby Snarks, for listening. And yeah, we'll see you Tuesday for Dark Energy Tuesday and also next Thursday for part two.
See you guys later. Bye.
Bye.